So moving along, I'm delighted to welcome our next speaker, who is Ailsa Bosworth, MBE. I'm sure you will all know Ailsa in her role as the founder member and former chief executive of the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society, which was set up in 2001. Now, that grew from a fledgling society to becoming an internationally recognized society supporting patients with rheumatoid arthritis, and continues to lead that in the UK and abroad. Now, in recent years, Ailsa has devoted a lot of her time to becoming or being a national patient champion, and she's passionate about supported self-management, and in that capacity she's worked with EULAR, BSR, NICE, and she's going to talk to us about some of her perhaps work and thoughts today. And the title of today's talk is Building Value and Better Outcomes into Your RA Patient Pathways. So Ailsa, thanks very much. I'll pour you a glass of water and we'll let you take over here.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carl, for your very kind invitation and introduction. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to actually be here presenting in person instead of inevitably online. So good to see everybody. So my talk today is going to cover the real need, particularly now with a broken NHS, to increase patient self-efficacy. The pandemic inevitably, whilst has disrupted a huge amount of healthcare, it's also brought opportunity. And so I want to talk a little bit about new pathways of care, what that means for patients, change management, and the challenges that that brings to a system with all the pressures that we currently have. And I particularly want to emphasize today the role that patient organizations can play and provide new partnerships for health professionals and adding value to pathways. And I'm going to finalize my talk by talking about some of the things that we're doing to support health professionals and patients today. So the reality is that patients don't know what they don't know. And that's particularly true when you're newly diagnosed with a long-term chronic condition. If I think about what I knew at the time I was diagnosed with a seronegative inflammatory arthritis 43 years ago, and what I know now, those are two very, very different scenarios. And the reality is that we need a huge amount of help and support to learn how to live well and to manage our disease as well as we can. But the reality is that we only see you occasionally. And with the new ways of transforming outpatient care that are going on at the moment, we're going to see you even less on a face-to-face basis. So this statement comes from the work that Eleanor, Nikki, Faru and I did as joint conveners of the EULAR task force, which created recommendations for the implementation of self-management strategies in patients with inflammatory arthritis. And it really is, I believe, the ability to self-manage is an essential component of care that is not given enough attention, I believe, by health professionals, but needs to really happen in a much more protocolized and uniform way now that we're dealing with the situation in the NHS that we are. For example, when I came in this morning, I tried to book myself a blood test. I was 21 in the queue on the call to my GP, and I couldn't stay on the line for the amount of time that would take to get through. I couldn't get through to the local hospital that provides blood test facilities. And the reality is that I'm probably going to have to get in my car and go down there and actually speak over the counter to someone to get an appointment. That didn't used to be the case prior to COVID. So trying to look after yourself well and trying to get things done is becoming significantly more difficult. But having trust and being able to rely on your rheumatology team is absolutely one of the cornerstones that you have to have if you want to be able to build your confidence, build your knowledge, your education about your disease, and your ability to self-manage it well. So you know all of this very well indeed. One of the things that we found astonishing was the pace at which we were able to introduce remote consultations. Normally it takes ages to introduce new things into the NHS, but this happened very, very quickly. And it demonstrated that not only can change happen quickly, but it worked for many patients. But it's also given us opportunities to design new pathways and models of care, and those we are now seeing coming through. One of the things that I did for this talk was to look at other EULAR recommendations for health professionals that have come along in recent years. Not only was ours in 2021 on the self-management strategies, but we had prior to that the recommendations for patient education, and since then we've also had Suzanne Verstappen's recommendations for lifestyle behaviours and work participation. And if you add up all these individual recommendations, and this is a very much needed but and very fantastic body of work, there are 32 recommendations. And I know health professionals are trained to feel that they must be the providers of everything for their patients. The reality is that you cannot provide all of this in an NHS which is so stressed, so under pressure, and where we've got massive workforce issues. Although from what James was telling me, rheumatology in King's is doing very well. I think he's the exception rather than the rule. So this is why one of the things that I want to emphasize today is professional patient organizations can help you deliver a lot of these things, and you need to see us, I think, or some of you need to see us in a different light, perhaps. So looking at how outpatient transformation is happening at the moment, we've got patient-initiated follow-up targets coming along, and I think everyone is currently engaged, because this is not just happening in rheumatology, but this is happening across the board with all specialties. So PIFU, we've got remote monitoring, access, EPROMs, the BSR platform, referral optimization programs, we've got digital apps, remote consultations, as I mentioned, are here to stay. And with less opportunity to see your team on a face-to-face basis, it really, really is essential to increase self-efficacy. Some of you, well, I'm sure all of you actually, will be aware of the rheumatology workforce report that came out from the BSR in 21. And what this showed was that a lot of units are unable to meet the current level of care recommended by the NICE quality standards. Massive regional and national variation in patient care persist, and there is unacceptable variation in workforce provision. And the reality is that this is leading to gradually more difficulty in us getting access to care, and that's impacting our patient outcomes and potentially contributing ultimately to more disability and loss of work. So when you take all of these things into account and you look at the news on a daily basis at the moment, we are concerned at the moment as to whether or not all of these things are going to lead to more or less patient-centered care. Are we still changing things to suit the system and to save money rather than to really focus on providing the best care for patients? We're seeing a lot of people already being put onto PIFU pathways actually during the pandemic when it was in full flow. But there didn't seem to be a lot of shared decision-making going on about those decisions. They were, a lot of them being made because of workforce issues, because of inappropriate GP referrals and all sorts of things. And people were just getting letters saying you're going to be put onto this pathway. You might have an appointment in 2 years' time. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch with us, here's a contact number and so on. And that can be quite devastating when you're a patient. If you're stable on treatment, suddenly being told that the 6-month appointment that you assumed you would have has now been cancelled and that you're not going to have a fixed appointment, or if you do, it's fixed for 2 years' time, that can be very destabling. And if you don't have the opportunity to discuss that with your team and to talk about whether you feel you're suitable or not to go onto one of these pathways, it can make you feel very vulnerable. Some patients are going on to PIFU are having access to things like remote monitoring, either through the BSR EPROM platform or through an app of some kind that might be dedicated to that hospital. But not all people have got access to remote monitoring, and it's something that I feel is very, very important if you are going to go on to a long-term appointment pathway where you are the one who has to decide whether or not you think you need to be seen. You need to be able to report what's happening to you in the interim, because it's quite difficult to remember unless you've got some means of making a note every time you have a flare or you have some issue. You can't remember all of those things over a period of 2 years, for example. So is this going to actually drive inequality? We also don't know whether PIFU is, because the data is not terribly strong and there isn't a lot of it, to show whether PIFU is equal to, better than, or worse than routine care. I'm working with a team in Oxford with Laura Coates, who are putting in a grant application this month to do a PIFU trial in inflammatory arthritis, which I think is very much needed. And what about annual reviews? If you don't have a fixed appointment for 2 years, what's going to happen about measuring for comorbidities? You know, with NIA audit, we were making real progress in terms of getting people on annual review. I don't have a problem as to whether it's 12 months or 18 months or potentially even 2 years, but we do need to have comorbidities measured for cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, diabetes, hypertension. All of these things need to be monitored in people with long-term chronic inflammatory arthritis. And I don't know what's going to happen to that, and that worries me because that's something that I think is incredibly important. So moving on to how patient organisations can support you going forward. Not everybody will know perhaps exactly what we do, what the breadth and the scope of the work that patient organisations do. We're much more than just providing patient leaflets and things like that. The vast majority of professional patient organisations contribute to national policies, national guidelines, quality standards, health professional education, and either conduct medical or social research amongst their beneficiaries. I've contributed to NICE and SMC health technology appraisals for the last 20 years and been on all the national guideline and quality standards and BSR guideline work relative to this area. So there's an awful lot of national stuff that we do to try and shape national programs of care. And of course, we support patients. That's our prime role. And we can and we do influence the health beliefs and unhelpful behaviours of your patients in a helpful and positive and constructive way. We educate, we inform, we provide emotional support and improve emotional well-being of patients. We provide peer support, something that's incredibly important and powerful. And we improve outcomes for patients. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about 3 services that we provide at NRAS. And when we design new services, of course, we think about the needs of the patients, we talk to patients, and we prioritize their need, but we also think about how is this going to help a health professional? How is this going to help a nurse? and add value into that pathway for the health professional. And we have three services here: New2RA Right Start, Living with RA, both of which are referral services, so patients can't self-refer, they have to be referred by a health professional, and Smile RA, which is accessible by anyone. You can self-refer to that, it's not a referral service. And all of these help health professionals to meet NICE guidelines, NICE quality standards, and NEAR requirements. So let's start with Right Start. Right Start is on the NICE Best Practice Shared Learning Database because it helps meet the NICE Quality Standard 3, which is that you have to offer patients education and supported self-management resources throughout their journey with disease. It's a simple 4-step process, and it's an easy online referral direct to NRAS with your patient's consent, and I'll show you how easy that is in just a moment. It's a 4-step process, and both these services support either newly diagnosed, or the Living With service supports people who've got existing or longer standing disease. Over 125 UK rheumatology units are currently referring patients into these, and as you can see, nearly 900 patients have been referred. These stats, incidentally, are at the end of October, and so they will be significantly higher than this now. And as I said, these help health professionals to meet NICE quality standards and the audit requirements. We're currently gathering empirical evidence on the Right Start service evaluation through 4 rheumatology units in partnership with University of Manchester, and we're recruiting into that at the moment. It's a simple service in that once referred, the patient gets up to an hour-long phone call with one of our helpline team. And from that, they'll get a tailored pack of support sent through the post, which will comprise links and various other things. Referral is easy. You simply go to our homepage on the website and you click Refer a Patient in the top menu there. That takes you straight to this page, and you can read more about the services that you can refer your patients to. But once you're ready to refer, you just click I'm ready to refer a patient. And that then takes you straight through to the form on the right-hand side, where you fill in a few details. We do need a few contact details from the patient, but it's being done with their consent, so it's all GDPR compliant. And then you click Submit, and then it's over to us. That comes directly into our database, and we then contact that patient within 3 weeks. So out of over 1,300 referrals as at end of October, about half, or just under half, don't respond to up to 3 contacts, and we do try and contact people in different ways up to 3 times. If we don't get through to them, we then write to them and say, we've tried to get hold of you, you've been referred by your team. If it's not appropriate for you to get in touch with us now, feel free to come back to us whenever you like, and we send them a pack of information, which either is the newly diagnosed or the Living With, dependent on their length of diagnosis. The resource pack that we then send them can include a variety of these things, whether it's hard copy, whether it's further human support through our online community or our peer support group, or digital resources such as Facebook Lives, e-learning, and so on. So there's a whole galaxy of things that we can provide for them at that stage. And we do also offer them a peer support call with one of our trained volunteers who has rheumatoid arthritis. And many of them take that offer up. So we're really allowing them at that critical point in that journey, at time of diagnosis, when they've got all kinds of things going through their heads, we can take the time to unpick what their issues are, what their problems are, what they're worried about, what the doctor said that they didn't understand. We can provide further support about the medications they've been offered, and so on. So a lot of help and support that's very much tailored to the individual. This is a very short video of someone called Eddie who's been through the Right Start service.
Hi, I'm Eddie. I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis for just over a year now. and unfortunately my diagnosis came at the same time as redundancy. So it was a heck of a shock. While the medical team that dealt with me were extremely expert, they were also really busy, and I didn't feel able to discuss everything that potentially was going on. And rheumatoid arthritis specialist nurse put me in touch with NRAS, and NRAS did provide telephone support. They did provide me with a lot of information, with support, and also with the experiences of others, which helped me to deal with the methotrexate side effects and also just have some idea of what to expect. All in all, they provide a really useful service. They certainly helped me. Thanks.
So one of the things that the 4 units that we're working with on this service evaluation with asked us for was a really simple poster about Right Start. And this is it. It's literally just been done, and we're going to be sending it out, but it's going to be available for all other units. So if you'd like one of these in your unit, and you'd like some of the patient information leaflets, then please do just get in touch with us at the email address on screen, and we will send these out to you in quantity free of charge. So the next service I want to just tell you about, and we've just launched a new module, is SMILE-RA. This stands for Self-Management Individualized Learning Environment in Rheumatoid Arthritis, and it is a unique program that really goes into all the different aspects of living with rheumatoid arthritis, and things like medicines and so on. You can see the currently available modules here on the right-hand side of the screen. And the most recently launched module is how to get the best from your consultation. And this goes into issues like PIFU and all sorts of things. So it's really timely that we've got this out right now. It's free to register. It's an easy registration online on our website. It's modular. It has, I'll show you in a second, it's got a very easy interface, uses lots of video, animation, voiceover and quizzes, and each module is developed with NRAS with one particular unit. And the unit who helped us do the how to get the best from your consultation was Lizzie McPhee's unit in Preston. So it's co-developed with health professionals and people with lived experience at every step. And this kind of format addresses many of the health illiteracy issues, which some of the really sort of very dry patient information can cause. All video content is subtitled for ease of understanding. Each module is about half an hour long, and we have a foundation module which takes you through why self-management is important, why you need to learn about it. It's not something that just suddenly comes to you. You actually have to learn how to self-manage. And to date, we've got over 1,600 registered users, and we're going to be working on 2 more modules, the first one being exercise and everything related to exercise, and then managing cardiovascular risk. So those are the 2 modules coming this year. It has a very simple Netflix-like display, and it doesn't take you through the program in a linear way. You can jump around. You can choose whichever module you want to go and look at first, and you can have your family sitting with you. You know, it's something you can do in your own time, at your own pace. You can go back to things and remind yourself of things. So it's very easy to use. Each module has got learning objectives at the start and 3 or 4 questions at the end to establish that the learning objectives have been met. And we've got embedded within the foundation module the RA Impact of Disease questionnaire, which you will be familiar with and has got these 7 domains. And that is taken at the point of registration, immediately following registration, and then we're going to be putting that out again to people at future time points so that we can get some measure of certainly some of the softer things how well people are doing. The programme is completely integrated with our Salesforce database, and having the RAID score embedded within the foundation module, and about 50% of people who register are doing the RAID module, so we've got 400 or 500 RAID questionnaires where we've got all that data. And it means that we can actually target resources for the first time in a very more scientific way, if you like, because we can see people's scores. And actually one of the things that I've been quite surprised at is the high scores we're getting on people scoring 7 and up to 10 on the question, how concerned are you about your disease? A lot of people, even although they might have low pain scores or low fatigue scores, very concerned about their disease. So there's lots of ways in which we can really target the resources and the help that we can provide. And the minimum learning outcomes pass rate enables us to determine really how well the information is being understood and how accessible it is. This is just some of the health professional feedback that we've had. I'll give you a moment just to have a look at that. So this is the first survey that we did in the autumn to gauge reaction to the programme. And as you can see, there's a lot of scope for getting more recommendations from rheumatology teams, and that's something that we're going to be working on first quarter this year. Most of the how did you hear about the programme has come from ourselves and through our website and our social media channels. These are just some of the quotes from the first survey. And these are some of the results. And as you can see, I think about 130 people took part in this, which was represented at the time about 15% of the total registrants. And as you can see, we're getting some quite good responses here. I'm sure they can be improved, and we'll be working on that, but 72% of people said SMART had increased their understanding of the importance of self-management. That is really key, because as I said, you have to learn how to self-manage this disease. It doesn't just happen automatically. 84% said they would recommend SMART to another person, also a good sign. If you've enjoyed using it, you're going to recommend it to somebody else. It increased knowledge of pain and flares, how to manage it. Increased knowledge of medicines. Medicines is really complex in RA today. There are so many options. And if something's not working very well, knowing what your options are in future, what's coming down the line, what could I move on to that might work for me? Really important that you know this stuff. Just to tell you briefly some of our other key resources, we have specialist online groups that are run by volunteers but focus on specific topics. We've got one on work and employment. We've got one on parenting with inflammatory arthritis. We've got one on sports and exercise, and I think there's another one which I can't remember. We have Here For You service, which is trained peer supports on a one-to-one telephone basis. And we have the largest, I think, global RA community with about 34,000 people on board, and that's Health Unlocked. And that is moderated and kept safe for the community by NRAS on a daily basis, and it's available 24/7. So if you can't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to talk to somebody else online, you usually can. Peer support is incredibly empowering, both for the person who's actually getting the support from the other person and for that person giving the support, because it helps to motivate the person with the disease who's providing that support. It helps to make them feel worthwhile, that they're giving something back. And there's no doubt in our minds, from the evidence that we've had over years of working with our peer volunteers, that somebody who's very resistant to taking methotrexate, for example, because they've read their hair's going to fall out, or it's a cancer drug, or all the other things that make it a kind of slightly negative thing to have to think about taking when you're diagnosed. Talking to somebody else with the disease who's been successfully controlled on methotrexate is much more powerful than a medic saying, you need to take this drug because it's going to help control your disease and so on. People want to speak to somebody else who's actually been on it and who's taken it and who's got the T-shirt and so on. So it's a very powerful thing, and something that, as I say, we provide in different formats. And for those of you who have South Asian populations amongst your patient population, we have a whole range of resources in Hindi, in Punjabi, some in Urdu, on a variety of relevant subjects, mainly in video format, because for these populations who sometimes don't read their mother tongue, having it in video or podcast format is very important. And we've got videos on the early GP consultation, on the early RA journey, on COVID, and so on. And we're adding to these resources on a regular basis. And we actually held a face-to-face event in October in Leicester. And that was a really great day. We had a number of Asian language-speaking health professionals providing talks on different subjects, and it went down really, really well. So we're going to do another one of those this year. And we have Facebook Live events on a monthly basis, which are then recorded and available to watch back from our Facebook site. We've got a whole host of different subjects on those talks. We've got videos and webinars in the Resource Hub on the NRAS website, and our YouTube channel contains hundreds of videos on different aspects of living with RA and patient stories and so on. So with that, I'm going to finish, and thank you very much indeed for your attention. I'm going to stay here if I may. Those chairs are a bit low for me.
I thought so. I'll come over and join you over here. So thank you very much to you and to the wider team at NRAS for all the wonderful work you do to support patients. We have a number of questions here from the online community, and I might just start with this one. I think it's probably more of an observation than a question. It doesn't really feel like the changes in the delivery of care are going to be in the best interest of patients. That's what I think clinicians feel on the ground. Now, the question is, how are we going to measure the impact of change in care delivery? I know perhaps as part of the audit we might be able to look at patient outcomes, and that's one tangible aspect. But that's not really that tangible or meaningful for a patient. In NRAS, are you collecting any data from patients in terms of the impact of these changes in care delivery?
We have. In fact, we're just about to publish a report that we did with Shirish Dubey and Raj Andev at Oxford, where we did a survey during the sort of peak of COVID over a year, looking at lots of surveys were done during COVID, but this was specifically looking at how people felt about remote access during that period of time, and how they accessed, what were the different ways in which they were able to access their team. And I'd say we're literally just about to publish that report, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. One of the things that came out of that was that the vast majority of people, I think 2/3 of the people who took part, I think there were about, from memory, something like 350 people took part, relatively few know their DAS score. And if you are self-managing, if you're not seeing your team for a length of time, and you don't know what your DAS score is, and you don't really know, maybe you don't engage with your blood test results and so on, how do you know that you are keeping well and that you're not gradually slipping and so on? Because I think it's, and I know this from personal experience, and I've seen the difference between how fit, which wasn't terribly fit, I was before COVID, and then now I can see the deterioration I've had in the last 2 years because I've been mainly sat on my bum in front of my computer 10 hours a day, so which is not good for anybody. But
and as I say, your own experience just recalling trying to get a blood test. I mean, as somebody who should know how to navigate the system is concerned. Exactly.
Just imagine what somebody who's
New2RA or doesn't really.
Yeah. I really do fear for what's going to happen over the next few years.
And that kind of leads on to the second question. The question is really, patient organisations seem to be stepping in now to bridge the gap in services, and is that sustainable? Now, I know that, with the economic crisis that we're currently in, I'm sure funding streams for charities are really challenging. And is this all sustainable?
Well, in the long term, no. In the short term, we're doing everything we can to man up resource-wise, to be able to, to take the increased calls and referrals coming from rheumatology teams, and we're absolutely, prepared and dedicated to do that.
Sure, I don't doubt that.
But we do need to have government recognising the value that we play in direct NHS care. We are providing an awful lot of support to patients seeing rheumatology teams all over the country. And, I mean, that's our job, that's what we do, but we don't get any statutory funding at all, and we have the vast majority of our outgoings relate to staff, because it's the staff all providing the services. But, we have to fundraise every single penny to pay, I think we've got 36 staff. Yeah. So, this is, it is a challenge, and it provides a real headache for the senior management of all charities.
And on a day-to-day basis, no doubt.
Organisations, I should say. Our status is charitable, but we are professional, evidence-based organisations.
Yeah. Okay. I got that. We have another couple of comments. One of the programs you mentioned a couple of you, was Smile RA, and we produced a graph that something like 10% of your referrals came from rheumatology departments. Now, and you're going to be kind of trying to raise the profile within the next 3 months. A couple of delegates have said that might it be possible to have an acknowledgement of a referral? So, for example, if a nurse specialist refers a patient through to the program, would it be possible to give some feedback just to say thank you, or this patient's been referred? They think that might do something just to raise the profile and to improve the link. So that might be something to feedback to the team.
Yeah, I mean, that adds additional administration
I appreciate that.
To us. But these are all things that we're looking at. I mean, we have a team of 3 who just deal with data and just deal with our Salesforce, because everything runs on Salesforce. We're looking at all kinds of data issues.
So questions from the floor now. We'll move over. Any questions from the floor? Any comments? Yes, from the front. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ruth.
Hi, I'm a GP, so my aspect's slightly different. But when you were just talking about the referrals, presumably that would be a referral from rheumatologists after a diagnosis has been made, or should the GPs refer?
Generally speaking, it would be from a rheumatology team, because you're referring patients with suspected inflammatory arthritis, and then they get a diagnosis from the rheumatology team. So it's at that diagnosis point. Okay. But I think some people, to be fair, and I think this is why we have about just under 50% of people who don't respond, sometimes people aren't ready. They're so overwhelmed with everything that's happened to them, they're just not ready to engage with somebody else. And that's fine. They can do it at some future time point, but certainly over 50% do.
Do the referrals living well with RA, and the patient can self-refer to Smile RA?
Okay.
Yeah, a GP certainly could refer.
They come from the rheumatology service.
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody with existing disease, there's no reason why a GP couldn't refer.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
But the New2RA program's got a very broad window. It's somebody who's been diagnosed within the last 12 months. So
Yes.
12 months.
yeah, so you could have been diagnosed by a rheumatologist and, as Ailsa says, not really been in a space that you want to engage with somebody else. And that could happen via the GP or be recommended by the GP at a later stage.
Yeah.
So I have standard end of sorry. I have a standard bottom of all my letters. This is our helpline phone number, and then patient organisations for the various diagnoses. And not a single person has ever contacted me based on what I've put on the end of the letter, which includes NRAS and the New2RA service. I don't know how to get people. I'm a nurse. I don't know how to get people to engage. It's so difficult.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I agree with you. It is difficult, but this is one of the reasons why we made New2RA and Living With a referral-only service, where you have to refer them, not just give them the leaflet and suggest you get in touch with NRAS. You have to refer them online and submit the form.
But
and
I
that
offer
way
them the
it comes
referral,
directly into us, and then we take over and contact the patient.
So I make the offer of the referral in every letter. Nobody's ever. So maybe it needs to be more verbal. I don't know.
Well, it needs to be online. Sorry, did you say you were in GP?
No, I'm a nurse. I'm a rheumatology nurse.
Oh, right. So you need to go online.
Yes,
with the
but
patient.
I put the offer to make that referral to the patient in every letter to them. So if you would like to, if you have a new diagnosis and would like to be referred, please contact me. Or if you have a long-standing diagnosis of rheumatoid, and you'd like to be referred, please contact me.
Yes, it is more powerful if it's done while they're in front of you at the time. And they say, I'm going to refer you to NRAS, to their New2RA Right Start. It's a great service, part of your care pathway. I'm making the referral now. Press the button, submit, and that way it comes to us and we then take over, and you don't have to do any more.
Okay. We've a couple more questions. Pooja at the back. Pooja, and then
Thank you so much for a great talk. It was really enlightening, and I just had a comment rather than a question that potentially may be helpful. With respect to the online audience that have suggested the feedback to the departments in terms of their referrals made, in the spirit of empowering patients, could you suggest to patients themselves who have had a good experience, we assume, with your service, to then feedback to their referrer their lived experience, which will then create that positive feedback loop and then reduce the administrative burden on you having to do that?
I think that actually happens a lot because certainly the rheumatology units that refer a lot of patients to us have generally kind of protocolized it amongst the MDT. So everybody is aware of the service, everybody is referring into it. And it becomes part of the patient pathway offering, where we get, we've got a long tail of units just referring the odd ad hoc patient. That's because it hasn't been protocolized within the MDT, and that it's just one nurse perhaps who knows about it and who's referring the odd patient. But if you get everybody on board with it, understanding the service, and I do a lot of presentations online in multidisciplinary team meetings to explain the service to the whole team, and then they can get on board with it, and then people do get people do feed back to their team, generally because most of the patients are being referred. But it's something that we're looking at, and I agree with you. We can certainly look at encouraging patients to do that.
Thank you so much.
Just while you're passing the mic on, we've had a lot of comments here about how valuable the session was, Ailsa. And somebody, Ben Mulhern, has said here that because we're now copying more letters to our patients, hopefully we're empowering them to read their clinic letters and get more involved in their care. And one other question from the virtual audience is regarding access to other services that can't be done virtually, like chiropody, for example, or orthotics. Are you hearing from your patient members that that's proving more challenging? And
absolutely, and whenever we do anything relating to feet and ankles, we get awful comments back, and I've done stuff with Tony Redmond in Leeds and so on at the SIG for at the BSR on feet and ankles, and foot health care is you know, non-existent.
Kind of
in many
untouched, isn't it?
areas.
Yeah. David. Oh, a question. I think. Pooja, have you another question? No.
I was just emailing a few patients about the Smile service as we were talking. I wasn't just reading the news. Can you please stress me the difference between the Right Start program and the Smile program?
Sure. Smile is an e-learning program that patients do. They register, they go online, and they choose whichever modules they want to look at. They do it at their own time and pace. Right Start is a referral service by health professionals for newly diagnosed patients, and that referral comes straight through to us. We then provide the 1-hour helpline call, the peer support call, the tailored package of information, and then they can have another helpline follow-up call and another follow-up peer support call. That's the service, basically, and that takes about between, you know, maybe 6 to 12 weeks to complete, dependent on the individual and their availability and timescales and so on. And Right Start is exactly the same, but it's for people with longer-standing disease. Does that make sense? And that's also a referral service.
So Right Start is a referral process for people with longer-standing disease?
No, Right Start, New2RA Right Start is for newly diagnosed.
Within
up to
12
1
months?
Within
year.
the last 12
and
months,
Living with RA is referral service for people with
Longer
existing and longer-standing disease.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, good. Excellent. So I think on that note, we'll conclude the session. Thank you very much, Ailsa.
Thank you.